His teammates called it banter. He called it abuse. Azeem Rafiq tells members of parliament that English cricket is institutionally racist, but will his testimony lead to change? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is racism in sports. Well, it's often referred to as a gentleman's game, and Yorkshire is home to one of England's most respected cricket clubs. But after serious allegations of racism, the sporting world is reeling. Azeem Rafiq played for Yorkshire for a decade, even becoming the club's youngest ever captain in 2012. But the now retired all-rounder says he actually became suicidal after the club turned a blind eye to his complaints of racial abuse and bullying.
The thing that hurts me more than anything else is people saw it happen. Privately, a lot of people said it's wrong. But when it came to it, no one, not one person, actually stood up against these powerful people and said, what you're doing is wrong. I was on the balcony a couple of times. I was nearly gone. And it hurts me to say that now I was gone.
Well, that was Rafiq in September of 2020, and more than a year later, the situation still hasn't been resolved. An investigation into the allegations did eventually find Rafiq was the victim of racial harassment and bullying, but it stopped short of saying the club itself was institutionally racist and confirmed no disciplinary action would be taken. But then details of the report were leaked to the press, and the backlash was huge. It found Rafiq's former teammate, Gary Ballance, had admitted to using a racial slur, and England legend Michael Vaughan was accused of telling a group of Asian players, "There's too many of you lot." Vaughan vehemently denies that claim. Yorkshire has been heavily criticized for its response to the scandal, and its chairperson, Roger Hutton, resigned earlier this month. His replacement, Lord Kamlesh Patel, then apologized to Rafiq and praised the former cricketer for his bravery.
I thank Azeem Rafiq for his bravery in speaking out. Azeem is a whistleblower and should be praised as such, and he should never have been put through this. And I'd like to apologise to him. We're sorry for what you and your family experienced and the way in which we've handled this. What happened to you must never happen again to anyone. While some strides have been made in the area of racism across the world of sports, this episode highlights a huge amount of work that still needs to be done. There's a clear need for an urgent and seismic change, starting from within. And I'm determined to lead this club to a better and more positive future.
But the scandal is far from over. On Tuesday, Azeem Rafiq fought back tears as he told members of the British Parliament about the horrific abuse he faced throughout his career and declared that English cricket is institutionally racist.
In 2017 pre-season tour, we were in a place, and Gary Ballance walks over and goes, "Why are you talking to him? You know he's a packy, or he's not a sheikh, he's got no oil." And this happened in front of teammates. It happened in front of coaching staff. We were on a bus trip in London to Surrey game, and we went past a couple of men with beard, and it was like, "Oh, is that your dad? If we go past a corner shop, or does your uncle own this?" And this happened in front of, again, Martin Moxon, Andrew Gale, club officials, and it would never got stamped out. Everyone saw it. But because the institution and the environment, it becomes such a norm in there that I don't think anyone thought there was anything wrong with it. And that's probably why some people don't even remember it.
Now, racism in sport is not exclusive to cricket. At this year's European Championships, 3 Black England footballers were racially abused after missing penalties in the final. So why is racism so prevalent in sport and in society? And what needs to be done to eradicate it? To discuss that now, I'm joined by Marvin Bartley, a football player and assistant manager at Scottish club Livingston FC. He's also the Equality and Diversity Advisor to the Scottish Football Association. John Bradley joins us from Liverpool. He's a football broadcaster and advocate for player welfare. and the head of media relations at the Icon Series Golf Tournament. And in Paris, we have sports journalist and presenter Firas El Echi. Thanks all so much for being with us. Marvin, let me start with you. I mean, there was a lot of emotional testimony today. Not sure how much of it you saw, but I want to start there and ask if anything stood out to you, because you'd known his case before. And as a sportsman yourself, was there anything surprising in what was said or even how the hearing was conducted?
Unfortunately, no, I wasn't surprised. You know, and that's probably the most damning thing when we're talking about subjects like this. I'm no longer surprised about what's said. I'm no longer surprised about what players are saying they've been through. You know, a few things that stuck out for me when certain players are saying it was banter. You know, when it comes to race and racism or any form of discrimination, it's not banter. You know, and people try and muddy the waters by saying that's how they've seen it, and the victims never see it that way. So yeah, I wasn't surprised, and as I said, you know, that's the most upsetting thing about it for me.
When they say it's banter, Marvin, what don't they get? Why do they think this is somehow, I don't know, funny or trivial?
Well, I think they only think it's funny or trivial when, you know, you show that you're upset, you show that it's not acceptable, and then they'll turn around to you and say, oh, it was just a bit of banter. You know, never prior to that will they be saying to you that it is banter. If they think that you laugh with it and it's all okay, nothing's said. It's only when you pull them up on it will they then say that it's banter. And as I said, you know, it's them basically trying to muddy the waters, them basically trying to backtrack from what they've said to you. Racism isn't banter. You know, as I can tell you, I've been on the receiving end of it. I've been a victim of it. And that's why I continue to speak to people about this and say, you know, some people say it's an educational thing, but these people wouldn't say it, you know, if they're out in public. They think it's okay to say in sports dressing rooms because, you know, you're at football or you're at cricket or any other sport, but they wouldn't go out into society and say these things. So they know the difference between right and wrong. And that for me is where, you know, you can't say it's an educational thing. For me, it's racism.
It's racism. I mean, you talk about you being on the receiving end of it. I mean, how did it make you feel? And this is what I don't understand about in sports. These are your teammates. You guys need to play together. And the best way to play a good game together is to have that high morale, you know, to feel that you're a team. So why would they engage in, you know, degrading language, even if they think it's banter or funny? They know that it won't be seen as funny by the person on the receiving end. So why have they not understood by now that this is lose-lose when they talk like this?
Yeah, I wish I could answer that. Luckily enough for me, it's been many years since I've heard anything like that in the dressing room. Earlier on in my career, I did hear it. And believe it or not, one of the worst for doing these sorts of things was somebody of mixed heritage, you know, and it made no sense to me. And, you know, I would continue to put him up on this and say, this is not acceptable. Why are you saying these things? And because he didn't identify himself, you know, as a black man, although his father was black, he thought it was okay to say these things. He thought it was funny. And on many occasions, as I said, I pulled him up on it. Luckily enough for me, you know, I've experienced it a very few times when it's coming from within the dressing room. You know, football has been absolutely fantastic for me. And in recent years, I've heard absolutely nothing. And actually, it's been the opposite. You know, people who aren't affected by racism want to stand up against it.
Okay. John Bradley, let me turn to you. Do you think Azeem Rafiq's testimony, from what you heard today, and this hearing will actually change the game of cricket?
I hope so. I hope it changes society's views as well. But we've been in this situation many times before. I think most notably with the murder of Stephen Lawrence some nearly 30 years ago now, and the Macpherson report that we had in the UK in 1999, which was supposed to be a pivot point for society, a breaking point for society. Yet here we are, 22 years on, talking about racist issues once again and racism within society. For myself, growing up when I did, I'm a little older than Marvin, but for me, around my school and my teenage years, racist language was commonplace. And whether that's something to do with the empirical outlook of Britain dating back hundreds of years and its place in world history, or just ignorance, you know, that's probably better for someone like Marvin to tell us. But the fact is that once again, we're in a situation where we have a player, and not just him, because I think that, you know, it's been spread across the sport, not just of cricket, but other sports as well, where we now have to look at ourselves within society and take a very good look at ourselves, because, you know, this simply can't go on any longer.
Right. Is what we're hearing, at least from Lord Patel right now, you know, what needs to be said? That it won't be easy, but he's going to do whatever needs to be done to bring the real change?
I think that, you know, the language that we heard, I heard growing up, whether it went underground or it was stopping, it remains open to question. I think that what we've heard in the last 5, 6, 7 years, due to political situations of the world, different political leaders taking place, I think that has given people more license to use, or what they feel, the language they can use and get away with. And it shows that educating these people doesn't work. We really need to punish them at source. And, you know, it has to be stamped out very quickly and dealt with in the harshest possible terms. The Macpherson report said in 1999 that any allegations of racism that are made by a player have to be dealt with as such immediately. Now, clearly, in this situation, Yorkshire didn't do with it in the correct manner. And that's something that they have to sort out in-house and deal with themselves. And you know, it does now look as though, after a very, very long period of digging their head in the sand, that they are starting to do with by the changes. But we've had Roger Hutton admitting to the select committee this morning that there was institutional racism at Yorkshire Cricket Club. We've had the Metropolitan Police accused of institutional racism as well. So this is a societal issue. It's not just a cricketing issue. It's not just a British issue. It's a world issue.
That's amazing. You said a report dating back to 1999, over 20 years, and we're still talking about it in the same context. You know, for us, we just heard John say you need to punish them. This education idea isn't working. So do there need to be consequences? And if so, which consequences for those who engage in racism and bullying in sport?
I mean, of course there has to be a red line that's clear for everybody, a red line that you cannot cross. But who empowered these behaviors in the last, let's say, decades or in the last 20 years? I think it's the politicians and the lawmakers themselves, the rise of nationalism, the rise of these political parties that sort of, you know what, if the economy is bad, let's blame the immigrants, let's blame those who are different. And now the situation in it shows clearly that it couldn't be further from the truth, right? Here you go. You have Brexit. Okay, so nothing is solved. Nothing is being fixed. It's you know, these parties are empowering hate and are fueling anger and are directing their cannons at people who come from a different background with a different color, people who are not like you. And it's just wrong and horrible. So maybe start with those people who feel like they are immune, who, you know, the institutions, these political parties, they think they are above everybody and they can speak like that. And when you are a voter or a citizen and you see that they're empowering you, of course you'll go after that. So in many ways, and the situation is quite similar in France, it's the politicians, it's also the social media that's just changing things. And yeah, the problem is a lot bigger. And I find it sad that 50 years after Muhammad Ali took his battle out of the ring, we're still there. We're still right where he started.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was one of Azeem Rafiq's primary complaints, that they acknowledged his complaints, but absolutely no action was taken, no example was set. Marvin, let me come back to you about why you think that is. Do they potentially fear some sort of backlash if they do take punitive action, particularly against individual players who matter to the team, who matter to winning the games?
Well, it's the value of these players, isn't it? You know, if it's one of your top players that are saying these sorts of things and, you know, somebody complains about, you know, what's been said to them and it's your best player, in sport now, all people are worried about is winning games. You know, these players have a value to them. You know, the investigations, they need to be governed by the people at the top of the sports. You know, we've got a problem now in football where inquiries are taking place. And I know on numerous occasions where the victim's not been spoken to, or the person who heard the racial abuse haven't been spoken to. So how are you doing these inquiries without speaking to either of these two people? And for me, it's just, you know, it's a lip service. You know, if the FA, for example, in football, go to the club and say, you must cover these 14 points within 14 days and come back to us with your findings, or we can investigate your findings at random. And if you haven't, you know, obtained the standards that we expect from you, then you'll be fined. What you'll start finding is these inquiries will be a lot deeper and a lot more will be done because you won't be able to get away with it. But at this moment in time, A player can go to, you know, their managers have been racially abused. The club will put out on Twitter, we're opening an investigation. 2 weeks later, they said it's insignificant evidence, and then that's the end of it. Nobody ever knows what's happened. It's only that this one's been brought to light because it's been that damning, it's been that upsetting and that embarrassing how the first one was done. Now, you know, the government are involved, but this should be the standard for everything. You know, you should know that if you don't hold people accountable for what they are saying and you allow them to get away with it, then we'll come down like a ton of bricks on the clubs. But until that happens, until the governing bodies in each sport take control of that, we're not going to move forward.
Okay. John, let's, if we can, try to look at the glasses half full angle, because so much effort really has been made over the years to eliminate racism in sport. You know, we have organizations like Kick It Out, players taking a knee at the beginning of soccer games in the UK. So much more media coverage has brought attention to it. Tell me something has made a difference, that something has gotten better over the last 20 years.
I hope it has. I fear that we've gone backwards in the last 5-10 years, as we say, because of the current political climate in the world. I think that certainly there is less tolerance now. The fact that players felt that they needed to take a knee, and that we have players from some clubs, some nations, and even some black players have said they don't want to take a knee as well, because they don't feel it's serving any purpose. But, you know, I heard Jordan Henderson, the England player and the Liverpool captain, saying recently that they will do it for as long as they feel they can educate the next generation of youngster to understand why they need to do this. And we talk about education, not working with some people. Well, let's try and help the next generation that we can have greater tolerance, we can have greater diversity and inclusivity in society, because that's what we're all doing this for. You know, the person stood next to you is your friend, no matter what religion or what colour he is. And I think that's the most important thing that we should all be looking at nowadays. It has to get better, and we have to look at these figureheads that we have in society to stand up and to, it's not even making a gesture, to stand up for each other. And while the politicians and these people can do what they want, you know, we look to our figureheads to really make a stance, and we can all do that from there.
And I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I mean, this is what still baffles me. I mean, this is a professional sport. You want your team to win. How does breaking the morale of a teammate, you know, help you do that and help you make money? Where's the commercial incentive to it? I mean, even if people, the sensitivity training and the education in that respect doesn't seem to be working, maybe try to push the commercial incentive that we don't want to affect the psyche of our fellow players by saying these racist things. Why is that so hard?
Dressing rooms are a very, very nasty place, I think, where it was always deemed that only the strongest will survive. You know, Marvin's been part of that for the best part of 20-odd years now, and I grew up in that climate as well. So it's very much a case of people pick at you, and they will certainly target you, certainly, you know, for what they feel that they're testing your mental strength, testing your character, but there's no place for it. You know, you can't test someone for their sexual orientation, for the color of their skin, for their religion, you know. But that's what happens in these places, and that's where it's got to be stamped out, and that's where it had to be stamped out by Yorkshire. It had to be dealt with very quickly when the allegation was made. It has to be dealt with very quickly in football. Sometimes people just don't get on.
Marvin, I mean, is that part of it, though? It's that survival of the fittest sports mentality, that you should be able to take it anyway, no matter how mean, racist people are. This is about your mental strength.
Yeah, I think the problem is that people don't know where the line is, that we spoke about earlier. And somebody, by saying to me, I'm not very good at football, or I've got a terrible left foot, they think that's the same insult as, you know, saying about the colour of my skin. You know, as you said, there's a lot of alpha males within you know, footballing dressing rooms that I've been in. And as I said, I can take criticism because I play football and I understand the industry that I'm in. As I said, there is a line, and at no time should another player be saying something about somebody else's skin colour, their religion, their sexual orientation, anything like that, anything that's discriminative. And I get it, because some players that want to play in my position, and I could be playing ahead of them, and their contract's coming towards an end, they're stressed, all these other things. But it's not an excuse for saying what they say. You know, go out there and perform better. Don't try and put me off by racially abusing me. And, you know, I've been racially abused before. on social media. And I came off and I said to the fan, like, why have you said these things? And he said to me, oh, because you're having a good game. Now I'm out there playing on the football pitch. I don't check my phone till after. So no matter what you said, I'm not going to see till after. So how can you think this is okay? You know, but that's what I said. It's just another insult to some people. And as I said, racism is 100% not another insult.
Right. You know, Firas, we've been looking a lot at the UK over the course of this program, but we know this is a serious issue across the world, in Europe especially. We'll remember Mesut Ozil. You know, he quit the German national team claiming discrimination against his German heritage. And he said something that resonated with a lot of French players as well that had complained about the same issues, that when they win, they're French. When they lose, somehow, oh no, they're Côte d'Ivoire, they're from Africa, they're somewhere else. And that's been going on for years. Has France, for example, done anything different to try to address their issues of racism in sport?
I think there's a cycle. I remember the most recent one. It was when Lukaku was having a bad game, and then they just, said the player of the African origin, whatever, they forgot that he's playing for the Belgium national team. The problem is that it's a cycle, and there's a point where they open a conversation, they start talking about it, it's a debate, and then people forget about it. This is why I'm in a point now where I'm starting to question the taking a knee action, because people are starting to get used to it. It's getting numbing to a certain point, and just people are looking for the game. You know what? Just, okay, you took a knee, start the game. And I think in France, it's quite similar, that people have the conversation and then they move on, but the problem is still there. I cover a lot of stories in Ile-de-France where I see plenty of young up-and-coming, talent, future Kylian Mbappe's, future N'Golo Kante, but they're never sort of welcomed in the community. They're always reminded that they come from another place, that they come, even though these people are 100% French. They're born in France, they have French citizenship. And I think, I don't know, I think it's time to escalate a little bit in an obviously civil way, but perhaps it's time that the players should stop playing. Perhaps it's time that they move to a bigger action, because racist chants are still there in every stadium. You see them in Ligue 1, you see them in Serie A. Racist abuse on social media, I think it's worse than ever. So I think it's time to take maybe a small step up, because at this point, taking a knee, I mean, yes, we are all reminded, but we're getting used to it, and things are not changing.
Right. John, you also had spoken about teams in the United States. I mean, how long it took for professional sports teams in the U.S. to acknowledge the changing racist team names like the Washington Redskins, and they're still doing, for example, the Tomahawk Chop. I mean, this takes decades for people to finally realize that it's respect, it's basic respect. But we might take, 3 steps forward and then a big step back. And I'm addressing this to you because I realize you're maybe the most cynical about this. Overall, though, eventually there is progress, is there not?
Without a shadow of a doubt, I think that we have made certain levels of progress. I think that has been hampered by the rise of right-wing politics that we've seen in America, and also in the UK as well, and across Europe as well. There are people determined to hold us back. I think that certainly society and people can come together to help push this forward. And don't get me wrong, I do feel strides have been made, and there are good people pushing things forward. But, until the voices of the good people get louder than the voices of those that are trying to continue keeping us in prehistoric times, then we're not going to make the strides that we need.
Marvin, are you hopeful that the voices of the good people will get louder and eventually overwhelm the game?
Yeah, I think the voices of the good people are getting louder. I think we need, we're talking about steps up. Taking a knee was never going to eradicate racism. It's a spark conversation. I've had it here with one of my friend's sons, who's asking why we're taking a knee, and his dad was explaining that Marvin's treated differently to me. But following that on, we need the governing bodies now to do their bit. So when you see, a stadium's closed, for example, and then UEFA decide to let, 10,000 children in accompanied by parents, and the same things are happening, you're almost celebrating that a stadium's been closed, somebody's been racially abused. We're not going to let you have fans in, but do you know what we'll do? We'll let a lot of local kids go into the stadium. Now, I get that that's a great gesture, but maybe you do that after the stadium closure. So you have your 2-game stadium closure. The third game, when you allow fans back in, we're going to allow 10,000 children to go back in, accompanied by adults. But not during your stadium ban, because that's then sending the wrong message to the next generation. So yeah, the good people like ourselves who will come on and talk, and I'll continue to take the knee because I'm a great advocate for it, but it hasn't made the changes that we had hoped for because it's not going to eradicate it. We need the governing bodies, we need the government. So it takes the people in power to then make the next changes. And for as long as teams and supporters can get away with racially abusing people and getting small slaps on the wrist, then nothing's going to change. You hit these clubs financially, and I'm a great advocate now for players walking off the pitch. I'll tell you what, if somebody's racially abused in the first 15 minutes of a game and the players walk off the pitch and say they're not going back on, that's it. Because then the governing bodies get involved because the value of your sponsorship is worth less. Because if these games are going to be stopped after 15 minutes, then we're not going to sponsor that game. And then what will happen is you'll see their governing body say, listen, you better sort this problem out. Find these people, hold them accountable, don't let them into your stadiums because now you're costing us. Until it hits people in the pockets, unfortunately, we'll see no change. And this is when it's time for the governing bodies and the governments and the powers that be to take control of this matter. But at this moment in time, they're sitting on their hands.
Marvin Bartley, we're going to have to wrap it there. Thank you, all three of you, really so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. We greatly appreciate it. And to our viewers as well, thanks for tuning in. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter @_Newsmakers and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.